No one else was here. I had been alone, and mannequins didn't just move. I backed toward the hallway, not turning my back until I was outside. My eyes darted from shadow to shadow. I'd just convinced myself to keep walking when I heard it. Footsteps, not normal footsteps. Not the soft slap of rubber soles, but a scraping, dragging sound, like wood or hard plastic being forced along the tiled floor. I turned, and my blood went cold. The mannequin stood in the middle of the hallway now. Its featureless, lifeless face stared at me, the overhead light glinting faintly off its smooth surface. I couldn't move for a heartbeat. Then it took one stiff, jerking step forward, another. The sound of its joints creaked and popped, the motions unnatural, puppet-like. Instinct took over. I spun on my heel and ran. My footsteps thundered in the hollow space. My shadow jumped alongside me on the wall as I tore down the corridor, heading for the nearest turn. I didn't stop until I ducked into the hallway leading to the restrooms. The footsteps, if that's what they were, stopped. I didn't dare look back. Inside the restroom, I gripped the sink and splashed cold water onto my face. My breathing slowed slightly, but my hand still trembled. I leaned forward, staring at my reflection, telling myself it had to be some kind of hallucination, an adrenaline-fueled trick of the light. Then I noticed movement in the mirror. A woman stood near the stalls, her back to me. She wore a plain cleaning uniform, her head slightly bowed, motionless. I blinked, and she was gone. My heart skipped. I spun around, scanning the restroom, but it was empty, completely, utterly empty. The strength drained from my knees, and I slid down to the cold tile. What was happening? I tried to force logic into it, but the pieces wouldn't fit. Every explanation I reached for slipped away, leaving only the cold, pressing weight of dread. My hand went instinctively to my pocket. The list. I unfolded the crumpled, sweat-damp paper with shaking fingers. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate, and utterly humorless. Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, do not look back. Mannequins sometimes trail guards, but if you ignore them, they stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware, and they'll get closer. I swallowed hard. I had looked. Rule 4. Avoid looking into the restroom mirrors after midnight. Too late. My stomach turned. I realized with a sinking clarity that I'd already broken 2 rules in less than an hour, and if the janitor was right, I hadn't just broken them. I had invited something to keep going, something that was now aware of me. Rule 5. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I swallowed hard. I hadn't heard anything yet, no voices drifting from empty spaces, but just seeing the rule written out made my stomach twist. If a warning like that existed, then there had to be a reason for it. Rule 6. If you hear a child laughing from the play area, leave immediately. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. The play area was halfway across the mall, silent when I passed it earlier, but the thought of hearing a child's laughter echoing through the darkness made my skin prickle. Rule 7. If you check the time and it's earlier than the last time you looked, return to the security office immediately. That last one made me glance at my watch almost reflexively. 11:30 p.m. I froze. My pulse kicked into overdrive. That wasn't possible. I had started my patrol well after midnight, and I'd been walking for a while. There was no way it was still 11:30. I didn't need further convincing. I bolted out of the restroom, my boots striking the tiled floor in sharp, uneven rhythms. Every breath I took felt heavier, the air thicker and more oppressive than it had been before. The overhead lights flickered faintly, as though the entire mall was breathing, slow, patient, and aware of me. The building didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was watching. I reached the security office and slammed the door shut behind me, twisting the lock with trembling hands. My chest heaved as I tried to slow my breathing, but my nerves were frayed raw. Another glance at my watch. Almost 1 a.m. That was more like it. But then what had I seen before? Why had the time shifted backward? My mind searched for logical explanations, a glitch in my watch maybe, but every answer felt flimsy and hollow. I needed to keep my head. If I let my thoughts spiral, I wouldn't make it through the night. Pulling the crumpled list from my pocket again, I forced myself to read the remaining rules. Rule 8. Between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., lock the security office door and do not open it for anyone. If someone knocks, they might not be who you think they are. Check the cameras before you decide. Rule 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate in person. Watch it from the cameras only. Rule 11. Under no circumstances should you leave before your shift ends. If you do, you risk something following you outside the mall. I let out a nervous, humorless laugh. What kind of job had I taken? Who had written these rules? The paper trembled slightly in my grip as I thought back. The mannequin that had moved on its own, the strange figure in the mirror, the impossible shift in time. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. And now the only thing that mattered was making it to morning. It was just past 1 a.m., and according to the shift log, it was time for another patrol. Every part of me wanted to stay in the security office, lock the door, and never step out again, but the protocols were clear. Ignoring them wasn't an option, not if I wanted to keep this job and maybe not if I wanted to stay alive. The cameras weren't showing anything unusual. Every feed was as still and lifeless as the night itself. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. It only made me wonder what the cameras might not be showing. With a deep breath, I forced myself to gather my courage, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. The air outside the office felt different now, thicker somehow, like the mall itself was holding its breath, watching me. My footsteps echoed down the polished tiles, each step sounding far too loud against the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint electric buzz of the overhead lights. That was when I heard it, at first so faint I thought it was just in my head, a low, indistinct mumbling. I froze mid-step, the sound prickling along my spine. It was coming from somewhere ahead, somewhere inside one of the abandoned stores. My stomach dropped. Rule 5 surfaced instantly in my mind. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I stayed perfectly still, straining to convince myself it was nothing more than a trick of the building, maybe old pipes or ventilation. But as I stood there, the sound persisted, and now I could tell it was definitely a voice, or at least something trying to sound like a voice. It was low, garbled, and yet it carried just enough cadence to make my skin crawl. I swallowed hard and forced my legs to move. Every step felt heavier than the last, my heart pounding in my ears. I kept my eyes straight ahead, determined not to slow down, not to tilt my head toward that sound. The closer I drew to the abandoned store, the louder it became. It wasn't shouting, more like an urgent whisper that refused to be ignored. The windows were still covered with brown paper, sealing the inside in complete secrecy. My flashlight beam slid across the surface, catching only the peeling tape and grime. The voice shifted in tone, as if it sensed me there. I quickened my pace. By the time I passed the storefront completely, the murmuring was no longer a whisper. It was closer to a wet, distorted gurgle, like speech heard through deep water. I kept moving, every muscle tense, refusing to let curiosity pull my gaze to that paper-covered glass. When I finally turned the corner, I thought the worst of it was behind me. But then I heard something else. Footsteps. Not normal footsteps. These were slow, rough, and uneven, accompanied by the unmistakable scrape of something solid dragging across tile. The sound was deliberate, heavy, and horribly familiar. I didn't need to look to know what it was. Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, don't look back. If you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware and they'll get closer. I clenched my jaw and forced my eyes forward, my pulse hammering in my temples. The dragging grew louder, the scrape ringing in my ears. Just keep walking. Don't look back. Just keep walking. The temptation to glance over my shoulder was almost unbearable, but I knew what breaking that rule could mean. My pace quickened, each step measured but urgent. The sound followed for what felt like forever, and then slowly it began to fade. I didn't dare sigh in relief until I could no longer hear it at all. My hands were trembling, but I had done it. I had followed the rule, or so I thought. That was when another sound cut through the silence, the steady mechanical hum of an escalator. I froze, blood draining from my face. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the security cameras. No hesitation this time. I turned and started back toward the security office, quick but controlled. The sound followed me, steady, relentless, its mechanical rhythm echoing through the empty mall. I passed the abandoned store again, doing my best to block out the memory of that distorted voice, and kept moving until the familiar hallway leading to the office came into view. My fingers were already closing around my keys before I even reached the door. I stepped inside, slammed it shut behind me, and turned the lock. My breathing was ragged, but I forced myself to focus. The rules existed for a reason, and I wasn't about to test their limits. My hands flew over the console as I flipped through the security feeds until I found the escalator's camera, and then I froze. Something was on it. It wasn't a person, at least not in any normal sense. The figure was impossibly tall, its limbs stretched far beyond natural proportions. Its arms and legs moved stiffly, each motion jerky, as though its joints weren't made for walking. The shadows obscured its face entirely, but I could feel its attention, its presence, like a cold weight on my chest. The escalator carried it upward step by slow step, and then, without warning, its head turned. It was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. Every feed on the monitors flickered, lines of static crawling across the screens. A harsh electric buzzing filled the office, rising in pitch until it made my teeth ache. Panic shot through me. Rule 1. Don't stare at the footage for too long. I tore my eyes away from the screen, shutting them tightly until the buzzing stopped. When I dared to look again, the escalator was empty. The thing, whatever it was gone. I sat there for a long moment, frozen in my chair, every muscle tight with tension. My hands were trembling so badly I had to press them against my knees just to keep them still. I had been trying to tell myself these rules were nothing more than absurd superstitions passed down by paranoid guards. But now I knew better. Something was here with me. And I still had hours left before sunrise. The hours that followed crawled by in an unbearable, suffocating silence. I didn't leave the security office again, not after everything I'd already seen. My nerves were frayed, my body taut like a wire ready to snap. I sat in the chair, hunched forward, my eyes flicking constantly between the glowing camera feeds. The mall appeared calm, too calm. The hallways stretched out in eerie stillness. The shuttered storefronts sat like hollow eyes, and the escalator that had once carried that twisted figure was frozen again, perfectly still. Yet the air in the office felt heavier with every passing minute, thick and oppressive, as if the walls themselves were slowly closing in. I was just beginning to think maybe, just maybe, the worst of the night was behind me when it happened. 3 sharp knocks echoed from the door. The sound hit me like an electric jolt, and I felt my heart leap violently into my throat. My first instinct was to check the monitors. My eyes darted to the hallway feed outside the office. Nothing. No one was there. But before my brain could process that, the knocking came again. This time it was louder, sharper, and closer, like the knocker was leaning in. Then came the voice. "Hey, how's the night going? Still think the rules are funny?" It was the janitor, or at least it sounded exactly like him. My stomach churned, bile rising in the back of my throat. Rule 8 flashed through my mind like a siren. Lock the security office door between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. and do not open it for anyone if they knock. They might not be the person you think they are. Always check the cameras to confirm. I glanced at the clock. 4:03 a.m. My pulse hammered in my ears. I forced myself to look back at the feed, praying I'd see him standing there. But the hallway remained utterly, impossibly empty. The knock came again, faster this time, almost impatient. "Come on," the voice urged, warm and familiar, but wrong. "I'll tell you what's really going on here." The tone made my skin crawl. I stood frozen, one hand hovering dangerously close to the doorknob, my mind torn between instinct and reason. Every fiber of me screamed that this was a trick, that if I opened the door, I wouldn't be looking at the janitor. I checked the camera again, still empty. No, I wasn't going to fall for it. The knocking stopped. Silence descended, thick and absolute. I let out a shaky breath, the tension in my chest easing only slightly, but I didn't dare move. I just kept watching the hallway feed. And then, he appeared. The janitor was suddenly standing right outside the door, staring directly into the camera lens. The sight froze me where I sat. His grin was too wide, his teeth too sharp, his eyes too still. Then the grin stretched even farther, twisting into something grotesque. As I stared, his body began to ripple and blur at the edges like heat waves rising off asphalt, until it looked less like a man and more like a shadow-given form. Slowly, impossibly, he seemed to dissolve into thin air, fading away until the hallway was empty once more. I checked the time again. 4:30 a.m. Whatever that thing was, it was gone. For the first time in hours, the oppressive weight pressing down on my shoulders seemed to lift, if only a little. My breathing steadied, but my muscles still ached from the tension, every joint stiff and sore. I stretched my arms and legs, the movement feeling foreign after so long hunched forward in that chair. But staying in the office any longer made me feel trapped, like I was just waiting for the next thing to come knocking. A short walk, just around the immediate area, might help clear my head. The mall was dead quiet as I stepped out. The only sound was the faint hum of electricity in the walls. My footsteps echoed softly off the tile, each step sounding far too loud. The fluorescent lights above flickered at odd intervals, throwing long, warped shadows that seemed to twist and shift in my peripheral vision. I kept my gaze low, refusing to look into the store windows or anywhere near the mannequins. I rounded the corner and nearly stumbled backward. There he was, the janitor. He leaned casually against the wall, wearing that same friendly grin he'd had when I'd first met him. "Rough night?" he asked, his tone light, almost teasing. For a moment I couldn't speak. My mind reeled, flashing back to the knocks, the voice, the grin, the way his body had dissolved into smoke just minutes earlier. This man standing here now, was he real? Or was this another